Lady Catherine Windsor stood in the grand hallway of Pemberton Palace, her elegant emerald dress rustling softly against the marble floor. The afternoon sun streamed through the towering windows, casting long shadows across the ornate carpet. In her arms she held her precious daughter, Princess Charlotte, who had just turned 4 years old. The little girl's golden curls caught the light as she played with her mother's pearl necklace, completely unaware of the tension that had been building within the palace walls for weeks. Catherine had always prided herself on her composure, a trait that had served her well since marrying into the royal family 8 years ago. But today, something felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, a sense of foreboding that she couldn't quite shake. The palace staff moved about their duties with unusual quietness, their eyes avoiding direct contact when they passed by. Even the usually cheerful head butler, Mr. Harrison, had seemed subdued during the morning briefing. The source of Catherine's unease had a name: Queen Consort Camilla. For months now, there had been whispers in the corridors, hushed conversations, that stopped abruptly when Catherine entered a room. She had tried to dismiss these concerns, telling herself that palace gossip was as old as the monarchy itself. But lately, the whispers had grown louder, more persistent, and more troubling. It had started with small things. Documents that went missing from Catherine's private study, only to reappear days later in different locations. Phone calls that were mysteriously redirected or never seemed to reach their intended recipients. Staff members who had served the family loyally for years suddenly requesting transfers to other royal residences. Catherine had initially attributed these incidents to the usual chaos of palace life, but a pattern was beginning to emerge. The most concerning development had been the gradual isolation Catherine felt within her own home. Invitations to family gatherings seemed to arrive late, or sometimes not at all. Her suggestions for charitable initiatives were met with polite smiles, but never seemed to progress beyond the planning stages. Even her husband, Prince William, had become distant, spending more time away on official duties that seemed to multiply with each passing week. As Catherine walked through the portrait gallery, Charlotte babbling happily in her arms, she couldn't help but notice how the painted eyes of previous monarchs seemed to watch her with a mixture of sympathy and warning. These walls had witnessed centuries of intrigue, betrayal, and power struggles. She was beginning to understand that she might be living through her own chapter of royal drama. The breaking point had come 3 days earlier during a family dinner. Catherine had suggested a new initiative to support young mothers in rural communities, something she felt passionate about given her own experiences as a mother. The proposal had been met with an uncomfortable silence before Queen Consort Camilla had smoothly redirected the conversation to a different topic entirely. Later that evening, Catherine had overheard Camilla speaking in hushed tones with several senior palace officials, though she couldn't make out the specific words. That night, lying awake in her bed, Catherine had made a decision. She would no longer ignore the signs or dismiss her instincts. Something was happening within the palace walls, something that threatened not just her position but potentially the well-being of her family. She had spent the last few days quietly observing, listening, and trying to piece together the puzzle of recent events. The palace guard who had been assigned to her personal security detail, James Morrison, had been with the family for over 5 years. He was a man of integrity, someone Catherine had come to trust implicitly. Over the years, he had shown unwavering loyalty and discretion, qualities that were invaluable in the goldfish bowl of royal life. If anyone would know what was really happening behind the scenes, it would be James. Catherine had noticed that James had seemed increasingly uncomfortable lately, his usual professional demeanor showing cracks of concern. During their daily security briefings, his reports had become more detailed, almost as if he was documenting everything for some future reference. When their eyes met, she could see a conflict playing out behind his steady gaze, as if he was wrestling with information he felt duty-bound to share, but protocol demanded he keep silent. As she reached the end of the portrait gallery, Catherine made another decision. She would find a way to speak privately with James, away from the ever-present ears of palace staff and surveillance systems. The truth, whatever it was, needed to come to light. For her sake, for Charlotte's sake, and for the sake of the monarchy itself. Charlotte looked up at her mother with bright, innocent eyes and smiled. "Mama, why do you look worried?" she asked in her sweet, childlike voice. Catherine forced a smile and gently kissed her daughter's forehead. "Mama's not worried, darling. Mama's just thinking about how to make everything better." But even as she spoke these comforting words, Catherine could feel her heart racing. Whatever revelation James might share with her, she sensed it would change everything. The perfect facade of royal life was about to crack, and she wasn't sure she was prepared for what might be revealed underneath. The late afternoon sun continued to stream through the windows, but Catherine noticed how it seemed to create more shadows than light. In a few hours, the palace would settle into its evening routine, and she would finally have the opportunity to seek out the truth that had been eluding her for so long. The opportunity Catherine had been waiting for presented itself during the changing of the guard that evening. As the palace settled into its quieter nighttime rhythm, she found James Morrison conducting his final security sweep of the family wing. Charlotte had been tucked into bed an hour earlier after an elaborate bedtime story about brave princesses and magical kingdoms, blissfully unaware of the real-world drama unfolding around her. Catherine approached James near the library, a location she had chosen carefully. The massive room, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and thick Persian rugs, would muffle any conversation while also providing a legitimate reason for her to be there. She had brought along a book she had been meaning to return, creating a plausible cover for the encounter. "James," she said softly, ensuring her voice wouldn't carry beyond the immediate area. "Might I have a word with you?" The guard turned, and Catherine immediately noticed the conflict in his expression. His professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the weight of whatever burden he had been carrying. "Of course, Your Royal Highness," he replied, though his voice carried an unusual tension. Catherine closed the library door behind them, a gesture that wasn't entirely unusual, but would provide them with the privacy they needed. "James, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. I know that puts you in a difficult position given your duties, but I believe the circumstances warrant it." James stood at attention, but Catherine could see his internal struggle playing out across his features. "Your Royal Highness, I serve at the pleasure of the crown and am bound by certain protocols." "I understand that," Catherine interrupted gently, "but you also serve this family, and I believe this family may be under some form of threat." "Not a physical threat," she clarified quickly, "but something else. Something that requires us to understand what's really happening within these walls." But for a long moment, James said nothing. Catherine could practically see him weighing his oath of service against his personal loyalty to her family. Finally, he seemed to reach a decision. "Your Royal Highness, if I may speak freely, there have been certain irregularities that have concerned me greatly." Catherine felt her pulse quicken. "What kind of irregularities?" James glanced toward the door, ensuring they remained alone. "Over the past several months, I've observed changes in communication protocols, unusual meetings held at odd hours, and directives that seem designed to limit your access to certain information. Most concerning, there have been discussions about your role within the family structure that suggest significant changes may be planned." The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. "Changes to my role? What kind of changes?" "I cannot say with certainty, Your Royal Highness, as I've only overheard fragments of conversations. But there appears to be a coordinated effort to reshape the public perception of your contributions to the royal family. Certain individuals have been working to document incidents that could be interpreted as failures in your duties." Catherine felt the room spinning slightly. "Failures? What failures? I've dedicated myself completely to my royal duties, to my family, to my charitable work. I know that, Your Royal Highness, and so does everyone who works closely with you. But perception can be manipulated, and documentation can be selective. I've seen reports being compiled that focus exclusively on minor scheduling conflicts, missed opportunities, or moments when you've needed to prioritize your children over public appearances." The pieces were beginning to fall into place in Catherine's mind. The missed invitations, the redirected communications, the gradual isolation. It was all part of a larger pattern. "James, you need to tell me everything you know. Who is orchestrating this, and why?" James hesitated again, clearly struggling with the implications of what he was about to reveal. "Your Royal Highness, I believe the Queen Consort has been working with certain senior palace officials to create a narrative that would justify significant changes to your position within the family hierarchy. The goal appears to be to diminish your influence and potentially your public role." Catherine sank into one of the leather armchairs, the weight of this revelation threatening to overwhelm her. But why would Camilla want to do this? What could she possibly gain? From what I've observed, it appears to be about consolidating power and influence. There are those who believe your popularity and your direct connection to the future of the monarchy represent a threat to the current power structure. By undermining your position, they hope to ensure their own continued influence over royal decisions and public perception. The room fell silent except for the ticking of an ancient grandfather clock in the corner. Catherine tried to process what she was hearing, to understand how her life had become the center of such a complex web of palace intrigue. James, do you have any evidence of this? Anything concrete? Some, Your Royal Highness, though I must be careful about how it was obtained. I've documented suspicious meetings, recorded unusual communications, and collected copies of some of the reports being compiled about you. I felt it was my duty to protect this family, even if it meant exceeding my typical responsibilities. Catherine looked at this man who had served her family so faithfully, who was now risking his career to warn her of dangers she hadn't even fully recognized. Why are you telling me this now? What's changed? James's expression grew grave. Because I believe they're preparing to implement their plan very soon. There's been increased activity in recent days, more meetings, more urgent communications, and he paused, clearly uncomfortable with what he was about to say. And what, James? And because I overheard a conversation yesterday that suggested they're planning to create an incident that would publicly justify the changes they want to make. Something that would make you appear unstable or unfit for your duties. The blood drained from Catherine's face. An incident? What kind of incident? I don't know the specifics, Your Royal Highness, but it would be something public, something that couldn't be covered up or explained away, something that would turn public opinion against you and create the justification they need for whatever changes they have planned. Catherine stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the palace gardens. In the moonlight, everything looked peaceful and serene, a sharp contrast to the turmoil brewing inside the palace walls. James, I need to see whatever evidence you've collected. And I need to understand exactly who else is involved in this plan. Of course, Your Royal Highness. But you should know that doing so will put both of us at considerable risk. Once we act on this information, there will be no going back. Catherine turned from the window, her resolve strengthening. James, my daughter is asleep upstairs, trusting that her mother will protect her and ensure she grows up in a stable, loving environment. I cannot allow anyone to threaten that, regardless of their position or their power. I understand, Your Royal Highness. What would you like me to do? Tomorrow morning, I want you to discreetly gather everything you have. We need to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with before we decide how to respond. And James, thank you. Thank you for your loyalty and for having the courage to warn me. As James prepared to leave, Catherine realized that her life had just taken a dramatic turn. The comfortable world she had known, with its predictable routines and clear expectations, was about to be shattered. Tomorrow, she would begin fighting for her family, her position, and her future in ways she had never imagined would be necessary. Part 3. The following morning arrived with an unusual chill, as if nature itself sensed the tension building within the palace walls. Catherine had barely slept, her mind racing through possible scenarios and strategies for dealing with the information James had shared. She had risen before dawn and spent the early hours in her private sitting room, watching the sun slowly illuminate the palace gardens while Charlotte continued to sleep peacefully in the adjoining nursery. By 8 o'clock, Catherine had composed herself sufficiently to begin her normal morning routine, though everything now felt different. Every smile from a staff member seemed potentially false. Every formal greeting carried the possibility of hidden meaning. The breakfast she shared with Charlotte in the family dining room felt both precious and fragile, as if she was trying to memorize every detail of what might be their last normal morning together. Charlotte, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension, chattered happily about her plans for the day. She was excited about a scheduled visit to the palace stables, where she would spend time with her favorite pony, Buttercup. Catherine listened to her daughter's innocent enthusiasm while silently praying that whatever happened in the coming days, Charlotte would remain protected from the adult world of manipulation and betrayal that was unfolding around them. At 9:30, Catherine received a message that James needed to see her urgently. They had arranged to meet in the old chapel, a location that was rarely visited during weekday mornings and would provide them with the privacy they needed. Catherine made an excuse about wanting to spend some quiet time in prayer, a request that no one would question, given her well-known faith. The chapel, with its ancient stone walls and stained glass windows, felt like a sanctuary from the modern machinations of palace life. James was already waiting when Catherine arrived, and she could immediately see that something significant had happened. His usual composed demeanor showed cracks of genuine alarm. "Your Royal Highness," he began without preamble, "the situation has escalated beyond what I initially understood. Last night, after our conversation, I conducted some additional surveillance and discovered that plans are being implemented today." Catherine felt her heart sink. Today? What kind of plans? James reached into his jacket and withdrew a small recording device and several documents. "I managed to record a late-night phone conversation between the Queen Consort and someone she referred to only as our mutual friend. The conversation made it clear that they intend to create a public incident involving you and Princess Charlotte this afternoon." The mention of her daughter made Catherine's blood run cold. What kind of incident? How does Charlotte factor into this? "According to what I heard, they plan to orchestrate a situation where you will appear to suffer some kind of emotional or physical breakdown while in public with Princess Charlotte. The goal is to create images and testimony that will suggest you are unfit to properly care for your daughter and fulfill your royal duties." Catherine sank into one of the wooden pews, the weight of this revelation threatening to overwhelm her. How could they possibly orchestrate such a thing? And how could they involve an innocent child in their schemes? James sat down beside her, maintaining a respectful distance, while offering what comfort he could through his presence. "Your Royal Highness, I believe they plan to use your scheduled appearance at the Children's Hospital this afternoon. It's a public event with numerous photographers and journalists present. Whatever they have planned, it will happen there, in front of witnesses who can testify to what they observe." "But James, I feel fine. I'm not going to have any kind of breakdown or collapse. How could they possibly guarantee such a thing would happen?" James's expression grew even more grave. "Your Royal Highness, I fear they may have found ways to ensure it happens. In the recorded conversation, there were references to ensuring the desired outcome and our contact in the medical team. I believe they may be planning to drug you in some way to create symptoms that will appear to be a natural breakdown or medical emergency." Catherine felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. The calculated cruelty of such a plan, the willingness to endanger not just her but her innocent daughter, spoke to a level of ruthlessness she hadn't imagined possible within her own family. "James, we have to stop this. We cannot allow them to harm Charlotte or to destroy our family for their political games." "I agree completely, Your Royal Highness, but we must be very careful about how we proceed. These people have significant power and resources, and they've clearly been planning this for months. If we simply cancel your appearance or make accusations without ironclad proof, they'll find another opportunity and we'll have lost the element of surprise." Catherine stood and began pacing in front of the altar, her mind working through possible approaches. "What evidence do we actually have? What could we present that would expose their plan and protect my family?" James activated the recording device he had brought with him. "This conversation provides some evidence, though it's somewhat cryptic. I also have documentation of unusual financial transfers, communications between the conspirators, and testimony from other staff members who have witnessed suspicious activities." As the recording played, Catherine listened with growing horror to Camilla's voice discussing the planned incident with clinical detachment. The woman she had tried to accept as family, despite their complicated history, was coldly planning to destroy her life and endanger her child. "There's more, Your Royal Highness," James continued. "I've discovered that this conspiracy extends beyond just the Queen Consort. There are senior palace officials, media contacts, and even some members of Parliament who are involved. This isn't just personal animosity. It's a coordinated political operation designed to reshape the monarchy's future." Catherine stopped pacing and turned to face James directly. "Then we need to think bigger than just stopping today's incident. We need to expose the entire conspiracy and ensure that these people can never threaten my family again." "What do you propose, Your Royal Highness?" Catherine's expression hardened with a resolve that surprised even herself. "We're going to turn their plan against them. We're going to attend the hospital visit as scheduled, but we're going to be prepared for whatever they try to do. We're going to document their actions and expose them publicly." James looked concerned. "Your Royal Highness, that would put both you and Princess Charlotte at considerable risk. If they succeed in drugging you or creating some kind of medical emergency, then we make sure they don't succeed," Catherine interrupted. "James, how many people within the palace can we absolutely trust? How many would stand with us if they knew the truth?" "More than you might expect, Your Royal Highness. Most of the staff who work directly with you and your family have witnessed the changes in atmosphere and have their own suspicions about what's happening. Many of them have been with the royal family for decades and take their duty to protect the monarchy very seriously." Catherine felt a spark of hope for the first time since this nightmare had begun. "Then we need to move quickly. We have less than 4 hours before the hospital visit. I need you to quietly contact everyone you trust and brief them on what's happening. We need eyes and ears everywhere, and we need people positioned to document whatever happens." "And what about Princess Charlotte, Your Royal Highness? Surely we should find a way to keep her away from whatever confrontation might occur." Catherine considered this carefully. "Actually, James, I think Charlotte might be our greatest protection. These people are willing to use her as a pawn in their games, but they won't want to be seen as directly harming a child. If we keep her close and ensure she's well protected, her presence might actually limit their options." As they prepared to leave the chapel, Catherine realized that the next few hours would determine not just her own future, but the future of her family and potentially the monarchy itself. The scared and confused woman who had entered the chapel was leaving as someone prepared to fight for everything she held dear. "James," she said as they reached the door, "whatever happens today, I want you to know that I will never forget your loyalty and courage. You could have stayed silent and kept yourself safe, but you chose to do what was right. Your Royal Highness, protecting this family isn't just my job, it's my honor. We're going to get through this, and we're going to make sure these people face the consequences of their actions." Part 4. The hours leading up to the hospital visit passed with agonizing tension as Catherine and James worked to implement their hastily formed plan. Word had been discreetly spread to trusted staff members throughout the palace, creating a network of loyal allies who would serve as witnesses and protectors during the afternoon's events. The head chef, Mrs. Patterson, had volunteered to personally oversee all food and drink preparation to prevent any possible tampering. The royal photographer, David Chen, had been briefed on the situation and positioned himself to capture whatever might unfold. Catherine had also made the difficult decision to contact her husband, Prince William, who was completing an official tour in Scotland. The phone call had been brief but intense, with William immediately canceling his remaining engagements to return to London. He was expected to arrive at the palace within hours, though whether that would be in time to prevent the planned incident remained uncertain. As Catherine dressed for the hospital visit, choosing a simple but elegant blue dress that Charlotte had always loved, she tried to maintain an appearance of normalcy while her mind raced through contingencies. Every detail had been carefully considered, from the route they would take to the hospital to the positioning of security personnel who could serve as witnesses to any unusual events. Charlotte, excited about the prospect of visiting children who were feeling unwell and hopefully making them smile, had chosen her favorite yellow dress and insisted on bringing along her cherished teddy bear to share with any children who might need comfort. Catherine's heart ached as she watched her daughter's innocent preparations, knowing that Charlotte had no understanding of the danger that surrounded them. At precisely 2 o'clock, the royal motorcade departed from the palace for the 15-minute journey to St. Mary's Children's Hospital. Catherine sat in the back seat with Charlotte, maintaining casual conversation while carefully observing every member of their entourage for signs of unusual behavior. James rode in the lead security vehicle, coordinating with the hospital's security team to ensure additional protection would be in place. The hospital visit began normally, with Catherine and Charlotte being welcomed by the hospital's chief administrator, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, and led through the cheerfully decorated pediatric wing. Charlotte immediately charmed the young patients they met, sharing her teddy bear and listening with genuine interest to their stories about their treatments and recovery. Catherine found herself genuinely moved by the children's resilience and began to relax slightly, wondering if perhaps the conspiracy had been called off or delayed. It was during their visit to the cancer ward, while Charlotte was reading a story to a group of young patients, that Catherine first noticed something was wrong. Mitchell had offered her a cup of tea, which Catherine had accepted gratefully after the emotional intensity of meeting so many brave children. The tea had tasted slightly bitter, but Catherine had attributed this to hospital catering rather than anything more sinister. Within minutes of finishing the tea, Catherine began to feel dizzy and disoriented. The room seemed to tilt slightly, and she found herself having difficulty focusing on the conversations around her. Her first instinct was to reach for Charlotte, to ensure her daughter was safe, but her movements felt strangely sluggish and uncoordinated. "Your Royal Highness," Dr. Mitchell said with apparent concern, "you look quite pale. Perhaps you should sit down for a moment." Catherine tried to respond that she was fine, but her words came out slurred and unclear. The medical staff immediately sprang into action, with Dr. Rexkick Mitchell calling for a wheelchair and several nurses appearing to assist. Catherine realized with growing horror that the plan was being implemented exactly as James had warned, but her ability to resist or call for help was rapidly diminishing. As she was helped into the wheelchair, Catherine caught sight of photographers positioned strategically around the room, their cameras capturing her apparent medical crisis. She also noticed that Camilla had suddenly appeared in the hospital, claiming she had come to support Catherine during this unexpected health emergency. Charlotte, frightened by seeing her mother in distress, began to cry and reached for Catherine's hand. "Mama, what's wrong? Are you sick like the other children?" Catherine's heart broke as she struggled to comfort her daughter while fighting against whatever substance had been used to incapacitate her. She managed to squeeze Charlotte's hand and whisper, "Mama's okay, darling. Just feeling a little tired." Dr. Mitchell announced that Catherine needed immediate medical attention and began to discuss the possibility of admitting her to the hospital for observation. Camilla stepped forward, taking charge of the situation with practiced authority. "Of course, doctor, whatever Catherine needs. I'll stay here to help care for Charlotte and coordinate with the palace medical staff," Camilla said, her voice carrying just the right note of concerned family member, while her eyes held a satisfaction that only Catherine seemed to notice. But as the situation reached its critical point, James's carefully laid plans began to take effect. David Chen, the royal photographer, had been documenting everything, including several clear photos of Dr. Mitchell preparing the tea that had incapacitated Catherine. Mrs. Patterson appeared with several trusted security personnel, announcing that she had discovered evidence of tampering in the palace kitchen, and had immediately contacted the authorities. Most dramatically, Prince William arrived at the hospital with a team of independent medical specialists and legal representatives. His face was set in grim determination as he strode directly to his wife's side, ignoring Camilla's attempts to intercept him. "What has happened to my wife?" he demanded, his royal training barely containing his fury. Mitchell began to repeat her explanation about Catherine's sudden illness, but William cut her off. "I want an immediate blood test performed by an independent medical team. I want every person who has been in contact with my wife this afternoon interviewed separately, and I want security footage from every camera in this hospital preserved as evidence." The room fell silent as the implications of William's demands became clear. Camilla's composed facade began to crack as she realized that their carefully orchestrated plan was unraveling. Dr. Mitchell looked around nervously, clearly understanding that her role in the conspiracy had been discovered. James stepped forward with the recording device containing the previous night's incriminating conversation. "Your Royal Highness," he said to William, "I believe you'll want to hear this." As the recording played, revealing Camilla's role in planning Catherine's public humiliation and the endangerment of Charlotte, the atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. The hospital staff, who had been unknowingly manipulated into participating, began to understand what had really happened, while the photographers and journalists present realized they were witnessing a royal scandal of historic proportions. Catherine, still struggling against the effects of whatever drug had been used against her, managed to reach for her daughter with one hand and her husband with the other. Despite her physical incapacitation, she felt a surge of strength knowing that the truth was finally being exposed and that her family was being protected. Charlotte, sensing that something important was happening but not understanding the full implications, moved closer to her parents. "Is Mama going to be okay now?" she asked William with the simple faith of a child who believed her father could fix anything. "Yes, darling," William replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Mama is going to be just fine, and we're going to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Part 5. The aftermath of the hospital incident unfolded with the swift precision of a well-orchestrated investigation. Within hours, independent medical tests had confirmed the presence of a mild sedative in Catherine's bloodstream, while security footage revealed Dr. Mitchell's unusual handling of the tea service. More importantly, the evidence gathered by James and his network of loyal palace staff provided a comprehensive picture of the conspiracy that had been building for months. Prince William had taken immediate control of the situation, invoking his authority as heir to the throne to ensure a thorough investigation. The palace's senior legal counsel was summoned, along with representatives from Scotland Yard who specialized in cases involving threats to the royal family. What had begun as a personal attack on Catherine had revealed itself to be a serious crime, with potential implications for national security. Camilla, faced with overwhelming evidence of her involvement, initially attempted to maintain her innocence. She claimed that any recordings had been taken out of context and that her concerns about Catherine were motivated by genuine worry about the monarchy's reputation. However, as more evidence emerged, including financial records showing payments to Dr. Mitchell and several media contacts, her denials became increasingly implausible. The investigation quickly expanded beyond Camilla to encompass the broader network of conspirators. Several senior palace officials were suspended pending investigation, while Dr. Mitchell was immediately terminated from her position at the hospital and faced criminal charges for assault and conspiracy. The media contacts who had been positioned to cover Catherine's breakdown found themselves under scrutiny for their role in the planned character assassination. Catherine, recovering from the effects of the sedative under the care of the royal family's personal physician, spent the evening providing detailed testimony about the months of suspicious incidents that had preceded the hospital attack. Her account, combined with James's documentation and the recorded conversations, painted a picture of a systematic campaign designed to undermine her position within the royal family. Charlotte, mercifully, had been shielded from the worst aspects of the day's events. She understood that her mother had felt unwell and that some bad people had tried to hurt their family, but the specific details of the conspiracy were kept from her. William and Catherine agreed that their daughter should be allowed to maintain her childhood innocence, while the adult world dealt with the consequences of the day's revelations. The palace's response to the crisis was swift and decisive. A statement was released announcing that several staff members had been terminated for gross misconduct and betrayal of trust, though the full details were not immediately made public. Camilla was quietly but firmly asked to step back from her royal duties pending a complete investigation, effectively ending her influence within the palace hierarchy. More significantly, the incident prompted a comprehensive review of palace security protocols and personnel vetting procedures. James was promoted to head of personal protection for the immediate royal family, his loyalty and competence having been proven under the most challenging circumstances. New safeguards were implemented to prevent similar infiltration of the royal household's inner circle. In the days that followed, Catherine found herself reflecting on how close she had come to losing everything she held dear. The conspiracy had been designed not just to remove her from public life, but to separate her from Charlotte and destroy her family's unity. The realization that people she had trusted had been actively working to harm her was deeply painful, but it also strengthened her resolve to protect the monarchy from such internal threats. William proved to be a pillar of strength throughout the crisis, his love for his family overriding any political considerations. The incident had reminded him of how precious and fragile their life together truly was, and he made the decision to take a more active role in protecting his wife and daughter from future threats. The experience also deepened his understanding of the pressures Catherine faced as a member of the royal family and strengthened his commitment to supporting her. The broader implications of the conspiracy extended beyond the immediate royal family to questions about the monarchy's vulnerability to internal manipulation. Parliament was briefed on the incident in closed session, leading to discussions about additional protections for senior royals and their families. The revelation that a coordinated group had attempted to manipulate public perception of the royal family raised serious concerns about similar attempts in the future. As for Charlotte, the experience became an early lesson in the complex world she had been born into. While her parents worked to shield her from the worst aspects of what had happened, they also began age-appropriate conversations about trust, loyalty, and the importance of surrounding themselves with people who genuinely cared about their well-being. Charlotte's natural resilience and the security of her parents' love helped her process the experience without lasting trauma. The legal proceedings against the conspirators continued for months, with several individuals receiving prison sentences for their roles in the plot. Mitchell, as the primary executor of the physical assault on Catherine, received the harshest sentence, while others involved in the conspiracy faced various penalties depending on their level of participation. Camilla, facing the possibility of serious criminal charges, ultimately agreed to a plea arrangement that required her complete withdrawal from public life and forfeiture of her royal titles. Catherine's recovery from the incident was both physical and emotional. While the sedative had no lasting medical effects, the betrayal by people she had trusted required time to heal. She found strength in her family, in the loyalty of true friends like James, and in her commitment to her royal duties. The experience had tested her in ways she had never imagined, but it had also revealed reserves of courage and determination she hadn't known she possessed. The palace eventually returned to its normal rhythms, though with heightened security and a more carefully vetted staff. Catherine resumed her public duties with renewed purpose, her brush with conspiracy having deepened her appreciation for the privilege and responsibility of her position. Charlotte continued to grow and flourish, her parents' love providing a secure foundation despite the dramatic events that had threatened their family. Years later, when Charlotte was old enough to understand the full story of what had happened during her early childhood, Catherine would tell her about the importance of surrounding oneself with people of integrity and the strength that comes from facing adversity with courage and truth. The conspiracy that had threatened to destroy their family had ultimately made them stronger, more vigilant, and more grateful for the bonds that truly mattered. The incident became a turning point in the modern history of the British monarchy, demonstrating both its vulnerability to internal threats and its resilience when those threats were exposed and confronted with determination and justice. For Catherine, William, and Charlotte, it marked the end of one chapter of their lives and the beginning of another, one built on a deeper understanding of both the challenges and the privileges of their extraordinary position in the world.